Hey guys, my name is Cynthia Veronica, and in this video, I want to talk to you about 5 different mistakes that I made early on in my children's lives. If we're meeting for the first time, I have 2 children. I have a daughter named Samantha. She's 4 years old, and my son Sebastian is 5 years old, and Sebastian just happens to have achondroplasia, which is the most common form of dwarfism. So let's get into these 5 mistakes. Okay, so the first mistake was not allowing my son to feed himself as a baby. I remember that when he was around 6 months old, one of the OTs that we went to go see asked me if he was interested in holding his own bottle or interested in feeding himself. And I remember telling her, yes, he is interested, but I don't really like him getting too messy, so anytime he tries to hold his own bottle or anytime he tries to feed himself with a spoon, I take it away from him and I just feed him myself. I don't allow him to hold it. And I remember I was surprised by her response. She said to me, "But Mom, that's how he learns. How is he gonna learn how to feed himself if he's not actually doing it?" So that was a big lesson for me because I started to realize, okay, that's how a baby learns, hand-eye coordination, gross motor skills. And they begin to learn and gauge how much food to put in their mouth and when. Babies actually gain a lot of skill sets just from feeding themselves, among other things. So when my daughter was born, I let her start using the spoon, and by the time she was 1 year old, she was feeding herself and even learning how to use a plastic knife to cut up her food at a very young age. And I wish I had done that with Sebastian. So the second mistake was not allowing Sebastian to dress himself and learn how to be independent at an age when he was really interested in doing things for himself. So there was a point when Sebastian, I think he was maybe 2 years old, he was really showing interest in dressing himself. And what I didn't really realize is that once they start showing interest in doing these things for themselves is when you really need to encourage it and nurture it. Instead, what I did was I would be the one to dress him. So I would take over that task. And it was mostly because we were running late and I didn't want to be late for appointments. But what I realized later on was that if you don't nurture it, if you don't encourage him to dress himself at a time when he's really interested, later on, he's not going to be interested anymore. That interest is gone after a certain amount of time. So it took a really long time for him to build up that interest again. And I really wish I had done something about it back when he was really showing that he wanted to be independent, because I got to a point where he would just stick his foot up in the air and be like, okay, put my sock on for me. And I realized, no, you should be doing this yourself. You know how to do it. You're perfectly capable of doing it yourself. So when my daughter was about 1.5 years old, she started showing a lot of interest in dressing herself. And I'm really glad that I did it at a time when she was excited about, having that sense of independence, because now she's 4 years old. And what she does now is she will get up in the morning, she'll make her own breakfast, she will go brush her teeth, she will get dressed, fully dressed, and choose her own clothes. She doesn't let me choose what she's gonna wear for the day. She actually chooses it herself. And she does this sometimes without me even having woken up in the morning. So allow them to dress themselves, even if it takes a lot of time in the morning. Just wake up a little bit earlier and learn to distinguish the difference between your child trying their best at something and getting frustrated, and teach them that it's okay to ask for help. You can always ask them, do you need help? Anytime you need help, you can ask for it. Because if they start struggling too much, they may, lose that interest and it'll just completely backfire. For my son especially, I want him to be able to be as independent as possible, because I do feel like it contributes to, having more confidence in himself. So the third mistake that I made was trusting that doctors and specialists either know a lot about achondroplasia or thinking that they're actually going to brush up and research on achondroplasia if they admittedly indicate that they're not really knowledgeable in it. Okay, so even though achondroplasia is the most common form of dwarfism, it's still very rare. So the doctors and specialists may know a little bit about achondroplasia, or they may be a little bit familiar with it, but they're probably not going to know a whole lot unless they are on the LPA Medical Advisory Board. But for the most part, pediatricians, OTs, PTs, other specialists, speech therapists, they're probably not going to know a whole lot about achondroplasia. When Sebastian was about, 8 months old, I had one physical therapist completely freak out because she saw him doing snowplow. And I was surprised because I had just sent her an article that showed, okay, snowplow is one of the positions that achon babies are usually very comfortable in, and it's perfectly normal for them to be in that position. So even though it was like a short 2-page article saying, this is okay, this is fine for them to be in this position, she was like going ballistic, and obviously she hadn't read the article that I had sent her a week ago, even though she indicated that she did. Another thing that really upset me about this particular therapist was she showed up to work sick one day. And it was obvious that she had a cold and just probably took some medication over the counter and showed up to work anyway. And she ended up, just as part of the play session, because a lot of PT it involves playing with the child, she took like this plastic tube and ended up kind of blowing it in Sebastian's face. And it took me aback, and I should have said something. I actually should have grabbed my child and left, because that was really upsetting, but I didn't say anything. And shortly after, Sebastian ended up getting sick. And when you have a baby who's sick, it really sucks. But when you have a baby with achondroplasia who is sick, it is 100 times worse, because they can't breathe. Their airways are small. They really have a hard time. We had a hard time. Nobody slept for days, and it was really upsetting to me. I never went back to that clinic after that experience. So Dan Kennedy is an author who wrote a book called Little People, and he basically talks about his experience with his daughter when she was a baby. His daughter getting sick would be life-threatening, and there were moments when he actually escorted therapists out the door when they walked in with an ever so slight cold. If they showed any type of sickness, he was like, nope, get out of my house. And that was a lesson for me. As soon as I read it, I thought, if my child is ever near someone who is visibly sick, I'm gonna do the same thing, out of my house, or I'm leaving. I'll just get up and leave. So just know that if your child has achondroplasia, if your child is a baby, you really want to be cautious around, people that are showing any type of, or any signs of illness. Even if it's just a simple cold, they might think, oh, this is harmless. No. Okay, so the fourth mistake was not putting my son in school sooner than I did, because I thought that I was sending him off to the lion's den by putting him in school. Okay, so with achondroplasia, typically you see a delay in development of gross motor skills, you see a delay in walking, you see delays in speech. For my son in particular, he had a slight hearing impairment since when he was born because he had water in his ear, and until he got the tubes put in at age of 2, he was hearing as if he was underwater, so that caused a speech delay. Then there's also the social aspect of having a child with physical differences. I was really worried. I thought, how will the other children view my child? Will they accept him? Are they going to be kind? There were so many fears that led me to prevent him from being enrolled. When he finally did start school, I was completely amazed at how much he learned, how much he flourished, how well he integrated in the classroom, and how simple it was to accommodate his needs, and how embracing the other children were. It wasn't even that the other children were trying to be kind. young children just saw him and didn't even seem to notice that Sebastian had a difference. They just automatically saw him as a friend. And it was such a good experience when he started, and I know everyone's experience is different, but I'm happy with the choice to have put him in school when I did. And I actually wish I had done it sooner and not let fear, get in the way of that decision. I also learned that it's very important to expose your kids to children with differences. It's important to kind of normalize that in their lives, to show them there's other people that are different, and you know what? It's unique and it's beautiful and it's great. So the fifth mistake is other people's reactions to my child with differences and allowing that to get to me. So I mentioned this in other videos. We would go out in public with Sebastian, and I would sometimes have encounters with rude people, even with something as simple like going to the supermarket. I mean, there are many examples, but one time Sebastian was around 2 years old, and we were in the supermarket, and these girls, young girls, were extremely rude in my opinion. They were staring at him. They were very obvious, and it was really uncomfortable for me. Okay, so I didn't react, but instead I internalized it. And even though I wasn't visibly upset, I know that Sebastian could still feel that negative energy emanating from me, even at the tender age of 2. So I learned, different life tools to help me deal with these types of situations. That was a journey that I went through. And one of the main tools, and I talk about this in another story time videos, is changing my thoughts about the situation, which in turn changes my emotions and my behaviors. So when those girls were staring, I thought how rude of them to stare, and I felt so angry and ashamed, and I internalized it and was not present with my son. So if I could go back to that moment in the supermarket, I would tell myself, those girls may have never seen someone with achondroplasia before. Wow, it's their lucky day. They're seeing my wonderful Sebastian, and he is so beautiful, and he is so unique, and he is so loved. He is an amazing 2-year-old, and I am so lucky that he is mine. Then that emotion that comes out of that is empathy towards the girls and love towards my boy. And the behavior would be being present with my son, smiling at him, going about my shopping. So in terms of lessons that I've learned, those are 5, and there's so much more, but I just wanted to start off with that. What a road it has been these past 5 years. I am in absolute awe and inspired by my child, by my children. And I'm so lucky to be their parent. And I hope that this inspires other parents with young children as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye for now.